Hello, everyone. Let me check and see if we've got any questions. Let me say right away that I know I said something last week about moving to Saturday, but I have a wedding tomorrow, and she keeps moving the time forward. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't see any questions, so we'll wait until you guys have questions. Hello, Thomas. Thomas says, "Hey, Eddie, you gave me lessons 100 years ago. I am trying to not use a small embouchure and breathing strategy as of today." Okay. Yeah, so I knew your name sounded familiar. Must have been a long time ago because I don't have a file on you, I don't think. So, smile embouchure. He says, I did group 5 of daily routines today. Went really well today, gulping like a... Oh, so yeah, you're talking about the breathing thing. Yeah. Well, cool. So how's that? So that I like to call that an embouchure adjustment instead of an embouchure change, because so the difference is with an embouchure change, you're actually moving the mouthpiece placement. You're actually putting the mouthpiece in a whole different spot, and that's not once you get that far into a change, we're talking like a whole year to fix it. The embouchure adjustment, like this thing was stopping the spread embouchure, that shouldn't take as long. It's not overnight, but it shouldn't take as long. So how are you the one that left the message on one of the because I just got a comment on that video. And this one is Tom Tudor. I haven't responded to it yet, but yeah, that might be you, huh? Anyway, any other questions? Or do you have any detailed questions or anything else you want to know about that process? It does take time. I will tell you that much. It takes time. It's not, like I said, it's not as severe as an embouchure change, but it can be just as frustrating. All right. Well, it's great to see you again, or not see you, but you know what I mean. Um, Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you. Thomas says, yes, I left a message on YouTube video, and that's me. Okay, cool. I noticed that while in a tonalization, I took a quick breath and went right back to my old ways. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. It's, you know, that's the trick of it, because we've been, a lot of us have been doing it that way for so long that we have no idea we're doing that. Gabriel says, hey Eddie, as a teacher, how often do you suggest an embouchure change in a student? I try not to. The embouchure change is so disruptive that it's got to be a last resort. And there's a lot that I've learned about embouchures over the years. And I think this is one of the things that makes me a better teacher. Pardon me for being that arrogant, but I think this is one of the things that makes me a better teacher, because most teachers will say that's wrong, don't do it that way. And I've just seen so many wonderful exceptions out there. Hello, Seppo, nice to see you. I've seen so many exceptions. And I'm talking about, when I say wonderful, I'm talking about pros. And you can be like my last teacher and say those guys are freaks. You can be biased like that and say, oh, well, my what I believe is true no matter what. And the guys who make it not true are just freaks. That's the word he used with me. He said, no, those guys are just freaks. No, they're not freaks. Every single one of us is different. So you have to, when it comes to embouchure stuff, you have to first of all take into account where the student wants to go. There's a student that came on to this Q and A couple months ago, and that would be a whole. He was somebody who his whole approach to playing would have to be changed, right? And it's not worth. You see what I'm saying about where you want to go, right? Hello, Jeffrey. Where do you want to go? If you are a senior in high school and someone tells you you need an embouchure change, you have no intention of being a music major. This is your last year playing the trumpet. That's just dumb. It's better to play with the messed up embouchure and do the best that you can than to try to start something you won't even finish when school's out. Now, that's just an exaggerated example. There are other examples. If the kind of playing you want to do doesn't really require you to have that kind of embouchure, then why would you change it? I think, if you go back to my my saying that I say all the time, all physical work should be for musical reasons. I'll say it again. All physical, we maybe work is the wrong word. All physical stuff should be for musical reasons. And why do I have to say that? Why did I come up with that in the first place? It's because a lot of people come into the lesson and say, I need to do this or I need to do that. And can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I ask them, why are you changing that? And they say, well, because I know that it's not right to do, like, let's use a preposterous example, right? Let's say you're somebody who puffs the cheeks. And let's say you've been doing that for 3 years already, playing trumpet like that. Not like this, okay, but with the top of the cheek puffing out. Okay? And then you watch some videos and say, oh, nobody should puff their cheeks. And now you come to your lesson and you say, Mr. Lewis, I need you to help me stop puffing my cheeks. And I'm going to ask you, why? Because some dude on some video said you should stop puffing your cheeks. That's not for a musical reason. What musical problem are you having right now that not puffing the cheeks is going to fix? If you don't have a musical reason for it, and not some mythical, not some mythical musical reason, right? So there are other students that come in and say, Mr. Lewis, my range is terrible, and it's because whatever reason it is, there's so many of these different things that people say online that's not true. My range is terrible, and it's because I don't tighten my corners enough. My range is terrible because I don't relax my lips enough. My range is terrible because I don't use enough air. And I asked them, what makes you think that? Well, I saw some video that some guy said, if you have trouble with range, this is why. That person never saw you play. That person doesn't know what kind of music you want to play. That person knows absolutely nothing about you. The best way to watch those videos is to say to yourself. So the guy that says that the corners need to be firm and this needs to be relaxed, what you need to do is say to yourself, what helped that guy play high was making the corners firm and relaxing the center. That does not apply to everybody. That applies to him and people like him. So, answering the question, when do you do an embouchure change? Only when the embouchure itself is preventing that student from reaching his or her goals, musical goals. There has to be a musical reason for it. And it better be a huge reason, because the embouchure change is so extremely disruptive that a lot of people will quit trumpet. They'll quit trumpet in the middle of an embouchure change because it's just too much. They can't handle it. So there better be a huge musical reason why they're switching. Now, I have helped 3 trumpet players change their embouchures. I mean, a full-fledged change. If we don't include the embouchure adjustment, I've helped probably 200 people with an embouchure adjustment. Okay? I'm really good at helping people with an embouchure change. And that's because of the physical trumpet pyramid. The physical trumpet pyramid has embouchure change built into it. But as good as I am, it's still a devastating experience. Now, if it's not a devastating experience, it's not an embouchure change. If it wasn't a devastating experience, it really is more like a adjustment, like with this breathing thing. Thomas says, I think my problem is a definite breathing wrong problem, smile breathing. Funny thing, I noticed I had almost no spit in the horn today, and I normally wet the floor with spit. That's an interesting correlation. That's interesting. Seppo says, one of my 11 years old students asked when he saw his part of your composition, The Lotus Eater, were there computers available to write that music in that time? I'll tell you what, I wrote that right after computers came out. So I got my first computer in 93. I think, I don't know, my copyright dates are not always the same as the date that I finished the piece. So I don't know what copyright date I put on there. But I'll tell you the story about the Lotus Eater. Oh, 1996. Okay. Yeah, I think I probably wrote it a little earlier than that, maybe 95. And my first computer was a 486 in 93. I know it's 93 because my son was born in 94, and it was the year before he was born. So, and so I wrote the Lotus Eater because there was a invitation on ITG, not ITG, what is it? TPIN, the Trumpet Player International Network, which I think is folded now. But one of the guys was asking for compositions that the group at ITG would read. And I sent him Lotus Eater and one other piece. And I never heard back from him again. No, thank you, no, thank you. And back then, I don't think anybody really knew. I was just then trying to get established as a composer. And let me tell you about that too. I stopped that. Back in those days, composition has always been part of what I do. I've been composing since 7th grade. So what is 7th grade? 7 times plus 5, that's 13 years old. 12 years old, sorry. 12 years old. I've been composing since I was 12. Now, I only have one old surviving piece from high school. All the other stuff doesn't exist anymore. And that one is a duet I wrote. It's actually in my celebrations book. I forget which number. I can look real quick. But anyway, it's the only one that survived. As a child, I wasn't very good at saving that stuff. And part of that was because at that age, I didn't know what composition was. That's funny, right? I didn't know what composition was. I thought I was just writing sounds that sounded good to me, that I could enjoy with my friends. That wasn't composition. Composition to me was something more lofty, more serious, more, in other words, it was beyond my capabilities, right? So I've been composing all this time. In the 90s, I, I'm starting to think more commercially, and I'm thinking, people need to know about these compositions so that I can make some money off of this. And that didn't go well. Every effort I put into trying to establish myself as a composer backfired, blew up in my face. So I quit. What did I quit? I quit trying to get people to know about it. I quit promoting it. I quit all of that stuff. And then later, um, I started, I started a few different things, but I think the biggest thing that happened was putting these videos on YouTube. I did not put them on YouTube to establish myself. I just put them on YouTube as an outlet. I put them on YouTube as an outlet for, sort of like what people started doing during COVID. I was already doing beforehand. If I didn't have a venue to have my music performed, why not just get it performed on YouTube? And that sometimes that's how life works. You do your thing and it goes terribly wrong. And then you give up and you put it in God's hands and God makes it work. There's so many things in my life that I did that way. So many things. And the composition stuff is one of them. Sorry about that. Yeah, the whole composition thing, the recordings. There's so many things in my music career that I tried to do it my way. I tried to do it the way people told me to do it. I tried this, I tried that. When I gave up and let God take over, that's when things started to work. And my experience is, and maybe this is biblical, maybe it's not biblical. My experience is that what happens when that happens is that God takes all that stuff you did before. Like let's use the Lotus Eater as an example. God takes what you did before. Now that you've submitted it to Him and let Him take care of it, God will now take the Lotus Eater, which I'm saying nobody did the Lotus Eater. Nobody was even interested in the Lotus Eater for 20 years after I wrote it. So, it's like that piece was in the dark for 20 years. It's like, and nobody cared, nobody was interested. And then all of a sudden, like in the last 2 or 3 years, people started playing that piece. And, this is what I'm saying. God does that. Gabriel says, Eddie, I always play alone because it's a hobby for me. But some friends invited me to play with them for an evening in a small chamber orchestra. How do I keep warm when it's time for the trumpets? We blow in the horn. we so if it's, oh, look at this time. I think it's time to get a new camera. This keeps happening. There we go. All right. You'll be sitting, right? So the horn, this is how I do it. The horn is in my lap upright, and I'll just sit there like this. I want to push the valves down so that the warm air goes through all the tubes. And you want to do it slowly enough that it doesn't make any sound to disrupt the show. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Thomas says, I really appreciate your strong faith. Well, I appreciate that, but I don't know that I would call it a strong faith. Okay, but I'll take that as a compliment. Seppo says, is there a story behind Lotus Eater? I mean, what is it about? The Lotus Eater is an experimental composition. So I only called it the Lotus Eater after I was finished. A lot of times I don't have a name, I don't have a theme, I don't have anything. I write what sounds good to me. And then afterwards, I give it a name. So when I save the file originally on the computer, it will have a generic name like in that case, that one starts off with chordal harmony. So I would have maybe named it chordal harmony piece or chordal harmony large ensemble or something like that. So that it doesn't have a name yet. When the whole thing is done, I listen to it and I take the images that the composition gives me afterwards, and I come up with a name. So when I gave it that name, I did there's this thing where you can do, they call it a web, I think, where you take the first word that comes to mind, right? The first word I think was daydreamer. To me, it sounded like someone having a daydream. So I put daydream in the middle of the paper. And then I started looking for words that are associated with daydreaming. And I looked in the thesaurus. And now I've looked for this again since then. And the thesauruses I've looked online and stuff like that don't have Lotus Eater as a synonym for daydreamer. But the thesaurus I had Lotus Eater as a daydreamer. My understanding is that 100 years ago in the English language, it was common to call someone a Lotus Eater if they were a daydreamer. Maybe daydreamer is the wrong word. A dreamer, someone who has big dreams and epic ideas and can see in their head whole scenarios playing out and stuff like that. So to me, the Lotus Eater up to that point in my career was the most epic composition I ever wrote. Now, how did I get to where it sounded that way? First of all, there's 3 sections. It starts off chordal. The harmonies at the beginning are in fourths. That's what I mean by chordal. It's not CHO, but QAR. Chordal harmonies. I'll put this in the chat. chordal harmonies, which means that the chords are in fourths, as opposed to tertian, tertian harmonies are in thirds. Like the tertian is like the traditional harmony. C, e.g., that's based on thirds. But chordal harmonies are okay. So that opening is based on chordal harmonies. Then I switch and I go to triad pairs. I'll write that down too. And the triad pairs part is the experimental part. I told you it was an experimental piece. I was exploring that sound. And the way I write triad pairs is I compose, because triad pairs create scales, right? So if I have a C minor and a D major, right? And put those 6 notes together, that's right. Okay, so I will write a melody using that scale, and then the notes underneath are filled out according to the which triad matches that note in the scale. So this was all experimental for me. I was exploring that sound. Now, and then I added to that the salsa rhythm from it's from the mambo section. So in salsa we've got 2 sections, right? Actually 3 sections. You have the song part of the salsa, the song part of the song. Then you have a montuno. Montuno is, now some people think montuno is the piano rhythm, and maybe that's true. That's not how we talk in the salsa world. Montuno is a section of the song, and that's where we have the call and response. So the chorus will sing ba ba da ba ba da ba da 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 da, right? And then the soloist will sing in between that repetition. Then we have the mambo section, which is the horns and the rhythm section going into counterpoint. Now the timbale will play a rhythm in that section that goes. So he's playing that on a rod on the edge of the timbale. And that's the rhythm I introduced to give that part of the composition, the Lotus Eater, that intensity. It's a salsa rhythm. And the melody itself conforms to the clave. So what makes that piece sound so epic is the clave rhythms combined with the triad pairs. Gabriel says, is it better that I start with breath only, or is it more safe a tongue attack? I think tonguing actually in the ensemble is better. Much better to do tonguing. Seppo says, I have also thinking those augmented seconds and diminished thirds. From what idea they came from. So that's from the triad pair. That's from the triad pair. I often, my favorite triad pair is the minor 1 and the major 2. That's that scale I just played for you. Right? So I think, now I don't remember which triad pairs I used in that piece. There were different ones. So yes, that's where it comes from. That's a triad pair. Seppo says, and the intensity for the rhythm comes out when the comp you just sang begins not the first beat but the third. Yeah, so that's salsa. I tell people that I played salsa for a living for so long that it is now part of who I am. Even the stuff that isn't even quote unquote salsa influenced, it still has salsa in it. It might not have salsa rhythms. It might not have anything like that. There's this thing that I do in my brass compositions. Not every single one, but I do it often, where the ensemble plays and then there's a soloist, and then there's an ensemble plays and it's a different soloist, and the ensemble plays and it's different soloist. That's salsa influence. And maybe the piece has no rhythmic salsa stuff to it. Maybe there's no melodic salsa thing, but the form of the song is influenced by salsa. So there's so many ways that my time playing salsa was influenced by, so many ways that my time playing salsa influenced how I write, how I play, my jazz, all of that stuff. So yes, what you're describing, it's interesting that piece came out the way it did because it really was just an experiment. Now, I've written literally dozens of pieces based on the same idea. I had one group, the university in El Paso. They contacted me and said, we like the Lotus Eater, but we don't have 8 trumpets. We only have 5 trumpets. What do you have that's like the Lotus Eater, but for 5 trumpets? And I said, I don't have anything. But I offered to write something, and that was the what's it called? The Voice of the Prophets. And this is, I'm going to put a link to the video of them playing this piece at ITG. So that video I just put a link to is the final product of me taking the Lotus Eater as a model and then replicating it for something more that they could use. I think it took me about, I don't know, 3-4 months to write. Seppo says, my students just love the Lotus Eater. Well, I'm glad. So yeah, there's nothing thematic about the name. It just you know it sounded to me at the end like someone daydreaming. Thomas says I play in church each Sunday. Rehearsal from 8 to 8:45. Play in first service 9:30 and in second service 10. I only have a few minutes to warm up. I'll warm back up at 10. What's the fastest best warm up in this situation? Um, shouldn't have to warm up. Now, maybe because you are doing that smiling thing, if you're not doing that, you shouldn't have to warm up again at 10 o'clock. So now that said, I do have what I call the quickest warm up, and it takes about 5 minutes. Let me see. I don't know if I sell this at the store anymore. We used to sell it on the old platform. I'm checking to see if it's on the store. It's not. So if you email me, I can send you it's 2 pages long. It follows the physical trumpet pyramid. And so that should work. Um, but like I said, if you already played at 9:30, oh, I mean 9 o'clock, a warm up at 10 should not be necessary. If it is necessary, it's only necessary because of the bump that the improper breathing creates. But yeah, email me and I'll send you that routine. Any other questions? I actually have 2 gigs this weekend. Thomas says, will do. Yes, it's probably the wrong breathing, so I've been real tight about at 10 o'clock. That makes sense. So yeah, I've got 2 gigs this weekend. One is a wedding tomorrow with one band. I've got like 4 different bands. I call that band Living Rhythms. And then on Sunday, I have a Blue News gig. Blue News is that band that plays the school concerts. But we're not doing a school on Sunday. We're doing the Children's Museum. Gabriel says, those guys are good. I'm listening to the video. Yeah, they put a lot of work into that performance. Seppo says, I will be performing in Helsinki at the Easter Mass at the Temple. Okay, that one I can't pronounce. Do you have any recommendations for repertoire, especially from your compositions? Is it trumpet stuff? So I do have an Easter composition that I call Passion. Trumpet and organ. Yeah, I don't have any trumpet and organ right now. I wish I did. Remember, I write only stuff that's going to get played, that I have a promise that someone will play it. And You know, the organists here are so uncooperative. The pianists, too, for that matter. You know, for my whole career, I've been trying to collaborate with pianists and organists, and they're not interested. I don't know if it's like my personality rubs them wrong or what, but I see other people having collaborations like that. Um, but no. So if I don't have a reason to write for trumpet and piano or trumpet and organ, then actually, you know what? Now that I'm saying that, I do have a piece. It's just not. You know what? I don't think it's appropriate for Easter. In fact, I think it's called Baby Jesus, so it would be more of a Christmas kind of thing. So no, I don't have anything like that. I'll tell you what, Seppo, the reason why I'm working on that mass for you is because you've been demonstrating that you play my stuff. So I feel safe. The last thing I want, especially the older I get, the last thing I want is to waste my time on a piece that's never going to get played. That doesn't interest me. I don't write just for my own jollies. I don't write for my own pleasure. For me, this is it's so time consuming and so involved and such an important part of my life. I don't want it to just sit in the file cabinet and never get played. So because you have put so much effort into it, it started with the Americana suite, and it just shows me that if I write something for your ensemble, you're going to play it. And so that's the only reason I've been doing that. Gabriel says, can trumpet and guitar live together in some music? Um, yes, there's a lot of really wonderful. You know, I might have shown you guys this this ensemble on YouTube that I love so much. I forget the girl's name. They're from Spain. I think it's Spain. Most of their stuff is in Spanish. Let me see if I can find this. And so the father plays guitar, the son plays trumpet, and the daughter sings. And it's some of the most wholesome, natural. To me, this is what music is supposed to be. That's that's how much I enjoy this stuff. This is what music is all about. I'm trying to find it. I'm terrible with names, or I would just say her name. The channel is under the daughter's name. I don't watch it for her. I watch it for the boy. I love that, the beauty of what they're doing. What their little ensemble touches my heart. Every time they play, every video they put out, it's just. And you know, when I first started telling people about this family, it was because the trumpet player didn't have a lot of skill yet. And I wanted to use him as an example. I'm still scrolling, by the way, sorry. They haven't put anything out. But I used him as an example of how musical you can be. You don't have to be like a virtuoso before your music touches people's hearts. Your music can touch people's hearts now. Really. Okay, they must not have published in a long time because I'm not seeing anything come up right now. But now the kid, it's like years later now, and the boy now has skills on the trumpet. I think they're touring the world. Their family. They add some people sometimes, but yeah. So I'm not seeing it. Sorry. Um, I wish I could remember who it was. Seppo says, "Can you recommend any other piece? Maybe a favorite of yours?" Um, and then he says, "We are definitely doing all you will write and as good as we can do." That's wonderful. Wonderful. So, do I have a favorite? Y'all, you know what? I think I do have a favorite. My favorite is, and I'll tell you what, I'll send it to you. If you're in, take a look at it. Um, Tell me if you like it. Um, I'm gonna send you a play. I'm gonna put a playlist in the comments because it's multiple movements. And if you like this, I'll just send it to you. Okay? It's called Hopewell Suite. If you like it, I'll send it to you in an email. So that's the link. I would say that's my favorite. It's 6 trumpets. Actually, 4 trumpets, 2 flugelhorns. Gabrielle says, "Oh yes, she's a young Spanish lady. You are right. I've seen her, and they are good." Yeah, it's. I wish I could remember. I want to say Ina, but it's not Ina. Yeah, I wish I could remember the name of the group, the name of the girl. I'll just do a search. Unfortunately, she doesn't come up on the search. She might not be Spanish. I thought she was Spanish. Yeah, I'm not finding it. Sorry. Um, Thomas says, "I live in Mississippi. Would love to have regular lessons, but video lessons, if you do ever even do them, doesn't seem like it would be that beneficial. thoughts on remote video lessons. So I do a lot of Skype lessons. We use Skype. Um, and what I've been telling people, so I had this conversation not this past weekend, but the weekend before. I was on a gig, um, and the saxophone player mentioned that he started teaching, and he asked me about what I do, and I told him that most of my students are on Skype. I think 90% of my students are on Skype right now. And I told him that works for me because unlike traditional lessons, and I don't know if I was like this 20 years ago. So you can say, oh, you're a liar. That's not how it was. um, but right now, what's happened over the 20 years is that things have clarified for me. I don't think I've changed much. I think what's changed is that the stuff that I do is more focused. And so I do believe my emphasis was always on learning how to practice. And that's what we do in the lessons. There is a little bit of back and forth, like I listen. And one of the ways that we get past the problem with the remote stuff is that if the students have good equipment to record themselves with, this is wonderful, right? If they record themselves, we can sit and listen to their recording. Now, if they don't have that equipment, then we don't do that because it's the same as listening to them on Skype, right? So, but yeah, the point I'm making is that with traditional lessons, the way traditional lessons work is you have the master sitting there and he's going to listen to you and he's going to assess how well you played. And then the next step is for him to tell you what you did wrong and then tell you what you have to do to fix it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I don't teach like that. If I did teach, I know I taught like that in the beginning. In the 80s, I was just doing what my teachers did. So somewhere along the line, this changed. I think it was a very slow change. But yeah, I think the last 20 years, it's all been about learning how to practice. I tell people all the time, learning the art of practice takes longer than learning how to play the trumpet. You can play the trumpet well within a few years. You need a lot more time than that to learn how to practice. That's my experience. So I think practicing is far more important than playing the trumpet. It's sort of like that old saying, give somebody a fish they can eat today, teach them how to fish they can eat. Once you learn how to practice, there's no limit to what you can do on your own. You don't need someone with better, superior ears to tell you what you've done wrong. In fact, there's so little of that in my lessons now. Karen can tell you this. There's so little of me correcting my students. I think that's why people stick around as long as they do, because it's not as devastating to have lessons this way. But yes, I don't do that traditional stuff. I don't tell you what you did wrong. I tell you how to do right what it is that you're trying to do. Now, there is another aspect of lessons is that there's the what do you call it? The diagnostics, right? And a lot of that I can get across from a Skype connection. There's a lot of interviewing kind of stuff. So someone says, I'm having trouble with this, and I'll ask questions. In what context are you having that trouble? What have you tried already? What works, what doesn't work? And then I'll ask them to do certain things, and we'll see. So there is a diagnostic portion of the lessons, but when we look at the majority of the time, the majority of that time is spent practicing, learning how to practice. And the way you learn how to practice is we practice in the lesson. That's another big taboo. The other traditional teachers think that's wrong. Don't practice in the lesson, they say. I say, if you don't practice in the lesson, how are you going to ever learn the proper way to practice? Seppo says, thank you, Master. I just wanted to ask for the repertoire for one trumpet and organ for Easter. We will definitely check this out too. Gabriel says, thank you, Eddie. I need to go as it's dinner time. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I should probably close it down. Thomas says, that sounds really great. I'll send you an email and see about setting up an ad hoc lesson. Wonderful. Good. Hello, Led. Nice to see you. All right. I guess I'll give you another minute to come up with a question. Otherwise, I'll shut it down. Favorite practice mute? I don't use practice mutes. So I don't have a favorite. I don't even own one. In the hotels, my strategy is to play as soft as it. So here's what I think. If I can play softer than my neighbor plays their TV, then I'm fine. I've never been kicked out of a room. Never. Nobody's even mentioned it. So I just play really, really soft. So if I do practice, it's going to be very, very soft like that. Jeffrey says, Happy Chinese New Year. Woohoo! I didn't know it was Chinese New Year. All right. Okay, guys, I'm going to shut it down. We'll see you on Saturday next week. This time for reals, okay? Led says, God is great. There you go. All the time. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Have a great week.